The bridegroom was not coming, and every soul in the cathedral had begun to understand it at once. From the shadows of the last pew, the Duke of Falkbourne watched the truth move through the congregation like a draught through candle flame, heads turning, whispers kindling, fans lifting to hide the cruel delight that bloomed behind them. At the altar, alone in white, Clara Whitfield stood very still and waited for a man who would never come, and Ashton felt his hands close slowly into fists upon his knees. The organ had faltered twice now. The clergyman had consulted his watch 3 times, with the strained patience of a man who knows the worst and has not yet been told. A note had been brought up the aisle. Ashton had seen it pass from a breathless footman to the bride's white-faced father, and whatever was written upon it had made the old man's shoulders fall as though something had been cut inside him. He had not had the courage to carry it to his daughter. He had simply folded it and looked away, and that small cowardice told the whole congregation everything. She had been jilted, before the whole of society on her wedding morning, in the sight of God and 400 sneering guests. The man she had pledged herself to had thought better of it, and not even troubled to come and say so. Ashton knew the man. A pretty, weak, well-connected fellow with debts and a roving eye, who had courted Clara because her family was respectable and her dowry adequate, and who had, Ashton had heard it murmured at his club a fortnight past, and had not let himself believe it, lately been offered a wealthier bride. So this was how he had chosen, not with a letter sent in decent time, but here now, with the bride already at the altar, so that the humiliation might be as total and as public as a coward could make it. Ashton had come to this wedding meaning to sit in the back and bear it, to watch the woman he had quietly esteemed for 2 years given to a man unworthy of her, and to wish her well, and to go home alone as he always did. He had not imagined this. He looked at her again, and what he saw undid him. She did not weep. That was the thing he would remember to the end of his days, that Clara Whitfield, abandoned and ruined before all the world, did not crumple, did not wail, did not flee. She stood with her bouquet trembling in her hands and her chin lifted, and she looked out at the rows of faces that were already turning from pity to pleasure, already composing the story they would tell at 100 dinners, and she bore it. She bore it with a dignity so complete, so unbought, that it struck Ashton harder than any tears could have done. Here was a woman being broken in public and refusing by sheer will to break. And the whispers were rising. Behind him a woman tittered. A man near the front said something low to his neighbor, and they both laughed, the soft, ugly laugh of people who have been spared, and are enjoying the suffering of someone who is not. The clergyman cleared his throat and began, dreadfully, to say the words that would end it. It would seem that the bridegroom is regrettably unable, and Ashton saw Clara close her eyes, just for a moment, the only sign she gave that she felt the blade going in. He was on his feet before he had decided to stand. The movement turned heads, a few at first, then more, then the slow ripple of a whole congregation realizing that the Duke of Falkbourne, the cold and formidable Duke of Falkbourne who attended nothing and esteemed no one, had risen from the last pew. The whispers changed their tune. He paid them no mind. He stepped out into the aisle, and began to walk toward the altar, his boothils loud and unhurried on the ancient stone, and the laughter died as he passed it, pew by pew, the way a fire goes out when the air is taken from it. Clara had opened her eyes. She was watching him come, and on her face was an expression he would spend the rest of his life trying to deserve. Not hope, she was too wounded for hope, but a kind of startled bewilderment, as though she could not imagine what this man, of all men, meant to do, whether he had come to add some final cruelty or merely to gawk at close quarters like the rest. He reached the altar steps. He stopped. He was aware of 400 held breaths, of the clergyman's open mouth, of the bride's father half risen and frozen, but he looked at none of them. He looked only at Clara Whitfield, white and trembling and unbroken, and when he spoke quietly for her, though the silence was now so complete that the whole cathedral heard every word. Miss Whitfield, he said, it seems there has been a grievous error this morning. Her lips parted. She said nothing. A man was invited to this altar, Ashton went on, who did not understand what he had been offered, and who has shown the whole of this company exactly what he is worth by failing to come and claim it. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. That is his shame, and it is his alone. It is not yours. You have done nothing this morning but stand here with more courage than every soul in this building put together, myself until this moment included. A sound went through the congregation, a collective intake of breath. Somewhere a fan stopped moving. I have esteemed you for 2 years, he said, and now, only now, did something rough come into his voice, the first crack in 2 years of careful distance. From across rooms, from the edges of evenings I attended only because you might be there. I told myself you were promised, and that an honorable man keeps his distance from what is promised to another. I told myself I would wish you happy and ask for nothing. He drew a breath. I find this morning that I was a coward too, a quieter sort than the one who did not come, but a coward all the same, for I might have spoken 2 years ago and spared you ever standing here at all. Clara's eyes had filled. She did not look away from him. I will not be quiet a moment longer. Ashton went down, deliberately, onto one knee upon the altar steps, a duke kneeling before a jilted woman in the sight of 400 who had come to watch her destroyed, and the gasp that broke from the congregation was like a wave hitting stone. Clara Whitfield, you came to this church this morning to be married. I would not see you leave it as the woman who was abandoned. I would see you leave it as the woman who was chosen, not in haste, not in pity, but by a man who has loved you in silence for 2 years and curses every day of that silence now. Marry me, not to mend his cruelty, not to spare yourself their gossip. Marry because there is no one in England I esteem as I esteem you, and no fate I want as I want the privilege of standing beside you for the rest of my life. The silence held for 1 heartbeat, 2. And then Clara Whitfield, who had not wept when she was abandoned, who had stood unbroken before all the world, put a hand over her mouth and began, helplessly, to cry, not the tears of the ruined, but the overflowing of a heart that had braced for the cruelest morning of its life and been met, instead, with the kindest. The bouquet slipped from her other hand and struck the stone steps and scattered, white roses across grey stone, and she did not look at it. She looked only at the Duke of Falkbourne, kneeling at her feet. You cannot mean it, she whispered. You cannot. After this, they will say I trapped you. They will say. Let them. He rose, and he took her trembling hands in both of his, roses and all, and the warmth of him steadied her where she stood. Let them say whatever they like. I am the Duke of Falkbourne, and I have never once cared what they say, and I care less than nothing for it today. For the first time in 2 years he smiled, and it transformed his grave, hard face entirely. I have only ever cared what you might say, and I am still waiting to hear it. But still she searched his face, the wound of the morning too fresh to let her simply believe. Why? She whispered, so low that it was meant for him alone. 2 years, you said. 2 years you watched me, and never a word, never a sign. I did not know you knew my name. How am I to believe a man can carry a thing so long in silence, and then offer me everything in a single breath, on the worst morning of my life? Because the worst morning of your life, he answered, just as low, is the first on which I was free to speak, and I find I would rather be thought rash than spend 1 more hour pretending I do not love you. His thumb moved once, gently, across the backs of her fingers. You wish for proof. I have none to give you here, save this. I knew the moment I heard he might not come. Not relief, grief, that you should be hurt. And under the grief, a thing I am not proud of, the knowledge that I had been given a second chance I did not deserve, and that I would be a coward twice over if I let it pass me by. I am many things, Clara. I have decided this morning not to be a coward any longer. A laugh broke out of her through the tears, astonished, disbelieving, alive. "Yes," she said, "yes. Heaven help me, yes." What followed, the 400 guests would describe for years. The Duke of Falkbourne told the stunned clergyman, in a voice that brooked no question, that there was a bride and a willing groom, and a license he would procure within the hour, and would the good man be so kind as to wait. He told Clara's father, who had sunk back into his pew with his face in his hands, that no shame had come to his house this day, that the house of Whitfield had gained a duke, and lost only a coward it was well rid of. And he turned, last, to the rows of faces that had come to feast on a woman's ruin, and looked at them with those cold dark eyes until, one by one, the smiles fell and the fans came down and not one of them could meet his gaze. He did not say a word to them. He did not need to. The man they'd come to watch be humiliated was standing now with the most powerful and most feared duke in England kneeling, risen, at her side, and the cruelty they had so enjoyed had curdled, in the space of a few minutes, into the sore knowledge that they had laughed at a future duchess. The whispers, when they began again, were of an entirely different kind. He married her that very week, when the license was procured, not in that great cold cathedral full of vultures, but in the small warm chapel on his own estate, with only her father and a handful of true friends to witness it, and snow falling soft beyond the windows, and her hand steady at last in his. There were no 400 faces. There was no organ that faltered. There was only Ashton, watching the woman he had esteemed in silence for 2 years finally come to him in the light, and Clara, looking up at him with a wonder that the cruelty of one morning had not managed to dim, but only to deepen. "I keep thinking of you standing there," she confessed that evening, when the chapel had emptied and the snow came down beyond their windows, in the last pew, all that while watching and saying nothing, and meaning to go home alone. "If that coward had only come, I should have lived my whole life, never knowing you had loved me at all." "Yes," he said simply, drawing her hand to his lips, "and it would have been the great quiet sorrow of my life, born where no one could see it. I shall spend that life instead," he went on low and certain, "making certain you never again wait at an altar for a man who does not come. I waited 2 years too long to claim you, Clara. I do not intend to be late for anything ever again." And the Duke of Falkbourne, who had risen from the shadows of the last pew to claim a jilted bride before all the world, kept that promise to the end of his days, so that the woman who had been abandoned in the sight of 400 became, instead, the most cherished duchess in England, beloved by a man who had only ever feared one thing in all his life, which was that he had been too slow to tell her so.